Hello and welcome. My name is Roger McKenzie and this is Red Star Talks. And tonight's guest, or today's guest, or this afternoon's guest, depending on when you look at this and where you are in the world, is the brilliant Margaret Kimberley, my sister and comrade. And it sounds as if we've known each other for years, but actually we haven't. It's only been fairly recently. But Margaret is, I think, one of the activist that people should tune into and listen to. She's the executive editor of Black Agenda Report. If you don't know that, then really I'm wondering where you've been all your life, really, because Margaret is doing some wonderful, wonderful work and you are missing out big time by not following her stuff on Black Agenda reports. She's the author of Prejudicial, Black America and the President, and Margaret tells me it's the anniversary of the publication of the book today, which obviously we planned. Obviously the whole thing was planned to do the recording then. But more recently, Margaret is also a contributor to China Changes Everything, an anthology which involves a load of fantastic activists, journalists, broadcasters, and so on. And again, these are two books that you really need to get into. It's interesting that China Changes Everything is one of the books, because that's, in fact, the first place that me and Margaret met was in Beijing, in China. When we were part of a Friends of Socialist China delegation, which I thought was a wonderful, wonderful delegation, really eye-opening, and enabled us to look at, well, really kind of knock back some of the kind of the myths about China as well. So there's stuff that Margaret's done about that trip and the stuff that I've done in the Morning Star. Now, the Morning Star, I should tell you as well, everybody, is now a partner of this podcast, which would be a bit of a shame if it wasn't, given that I'm the international editor of the Morning Star, but it is now a partner. And also, of course, this is also partnered by Manifesto Press and Red Star Media as well. And Red Star Media are the producers, and the producer for us this evening is Rochelle Swanson. And thanks to Rochelle in advance. So let's get into it, Margaret. Thank you so much for giving up your valuable time to come and join us today.
Oh, I'm so honored to be with you, and thank you so much for that kind introduction. But I love these opportunities to talk to more people. We have to use this technology to work for us, to work for the left. So I always look forward, first of all, to talking to you, but to sharing with hopefully a new audience, so that we can help spread the knowledge, as it were. We're up against a lot with corporate media, so I believe we're really obligated to build independent media wherever we are in the world. So thank you so much for inviting me.
No problem at all. It's interesting that I think this is the fourth of the podcast that we've done, and of the first three participants have been from independent media, and that's very, very deliberate from me, that we do amplify those voices, like yourself and like Vijay Prashad, we've had on, and like Eugene Perrier, who we've had on as well, and it's it's a way of making sure that maybe the voices that don't get the airing that they should, and as Vijay called it, the moneyed media, we can move away from them so that we can look at good, positive ways of creating our own kind of ways of being able to spread the message. But one of the things about this podcast, Margaret, is that it's not an academic kind of process. The whole point is about trying to stimulate people to go out and organize. So I'm hoping that that's where the discussion will get to this evening. That is, so what is it that people actually need to do? As a starting point, though, what I'd like to ask you to just say a little bit about how you became a journalist, how you got into this line of work.
Oh, well, it's a funny story. I did not write until I was in my early 40s, and I'm 66 now. So in the early O's, I don't know about in the UK, but that's when everybody here in the US was blogging. That was the thing. Everybody have a blog, and so I did too. And my politics were really shaped quite a lot by the election in the year 2000, when George W. Bush defeated Al Gore. I should say defeated in quotes, because the election was stolen. And I think millions of other people were really educated about our own system. We have this weird system of presidential elections where someone can lose the popular vote and still win. And that really shaped my understanding of how the United States really worked. We saw this theft of an election, and it really was a moment. They always talk about when someone's radicalized. I guess you could say that was the moment for me. And I realized that I had a need to learn more. At about this same time, I discovered a website called Black Commentator. And Glenn Ford, now passed away, was one of the co-publishers of Black Commentator. And I started to read. I wrote a letter, which was published. And I actually, I wrote Glenn Ford, an email and said, "Can I submit something?" He said, "Okay, go ahead." And I did, and they accepted it. And that must have been 2003, I think. And that began a relationship. Glenn asked me to write regularly, and he said, "I'd like for you to write every week." He said, "Although that's hard," but I, being naive, said, "No, I'll write every week," which was hard, but it was great preparation. It was great training for me as a writer. A few years later, for a variety of reasons, Glenn and Bruce Dixon, who's also passed away now, decided to go out on our own, and we started Black Agenda Report in 2006. And I was again writing every week, then asked to contribute to anthologies, then asked to write a book myself. Always remained politically active in organizations like the United National Anti-War Coalition, like the Black Alliance for Peace. And through those activities, I met people like you from all over the world. So I hope that answers your question. It was sort of accidental. I think it's important to point out I was not a professional journalist. I was not trained to be one. And I think it's important for people to know that Glenn always encouraged me. He mentored other people as well. And that's the other reason I think it's important to have these opportunities to share this information. You can be a writer if you write a lot, if you have someone to assist you, edit, guide you, and you have to do the work. Let's not act like there's anything magical going on here. And we need to hear more voices. We really do. So I always like to point out how I got my start. I was not a young person, not professionally trained, and now I'm a published author as a result of all those years of work.
I think our stories are so similar. I obviously wasn't either, and there's a lot of people around us say, "Well, that shows that you obviously weren't." To me, I was obviously, as many people watching this will know, I was a trade unionist for many years, and I came to journalism late as well, actually later than you did. But I suppose one of the things that I always feel over the years that I've missed out on is meeting Bruce and Glenn, actually,
Yeah.
because I just I've read their stuff. I've gone back and looked at all their stuff, and I just think it is extraordinary work that they were both doing, as you are doing as well. And I wish I'd had the opportunity to meet with them and talk with them and to organize alongside them as well. And Glenn wrote a book called Black Agenda as well, I think,
Yeah,
was it called?
he finished the manuscript before he passed away. He was very ill last couple years of his life. He died in 2021. He finished the manuscript early, I suppose, the end of 2020. And the Black Agenda, published by Or Books, is a compilation of what he thinks was his best work over the years: U.S. domestic politics, international politics. It's I wrote the foreword. I was very honored that I was asked to do that. Glenn was a committed socialist. He was committed Black nationalist as well. He had an interesting life. He grew up in New Jersey, not far from here in New York, but he also grew up in Georgia in the segregated South. His mother was a socialist, so he had that political background, but he also experienced firsthand one of the first iterations of U.S. fascism, Jim Crow segregation. Came of age during the Vietnam War era, was in the military at that time. But his father was a DJ and had a radio show in Georgia, and he had this political background, a media background, was first on the radio when he was a kid, literally. And all of that combined to make him this formidable force in media for the Black left. And our tagline for Black Agenda Report is news and analysis from a Black left perspective. And we mean left. We don't mean Democratic Party or any fake, fakery leftist. And an internationalist as well. But Glenn always, he thought about everything in terms of how it was going to affect Black people. And that also, that laser-like focus on Black people. He was a Black Panther, member of the Black Panther Party as a young man. So all of these experiences combined to make him this great journalist. Bruce Dixon also was a member of the Black Panther Party in Chicago, and as a young person knew Fred Hampton, who was assassinated by the FBI. So both of them, and neither of them also had a background. Well, Glenn, I would say more, but Bruce also was not professionally trained to be a journalist. And I'm hammering this home, I hope, because we need to hear these stories. We need to hear, the experiences of millions of people are ignored by the corporate media. We don't know anything about working people anywhere in the world. We don't know anything about working people. We don't know hear a lot about people in marginalized communities. Here in the US, that's mostly Black people, other communities. So it's so very important to have people writing from every background. Because if you don't have that, then people are ignored. They're ignored by the powerful, ignored by the media. And that's not something we want.
And also, I couldn't agree with you more, but also I think the news is distorted. The news is told from a particular perspective.
Yes.
I'm very clear that I write from a perspective from the left as a working class Black man. And the people who, when you look at the media in Britain, we've talked about this before, but the media in Britain, highly dominated by the white kind of ruling class, who've got no real link to our world and to the things that are happening. And to me, one of the things that kind of illustrates that today is what is going on in the United States right now. When you look at, there's lots of examples we could have chosen, I guess, to talk about a rise of authoritarianism in the US. But I guess one of the things that's on across our social media kind of platforms that a lot of people are seeing, and sometimes even reaches the moneyed media as well, is the way that immigration, customs enforcement, so ICE, is behaving in places like Minneapolis, but not solely in Minneapolis. And I've seen some of your comments around this, which I found really interesting, which is one of the many reasons why I wanted to have a conversation with you, because you make it really clear that a lot of the things that are now being experienced there are things that have been happening to the Black community across the US for years. So what is happening in terms of ICE? What is it, so that we can get a picture from, a genuine picture from the States?
Well, there's several things that make the Trump administration unique. We always have the ruling class ruling. That's true for Democrats. It's true for Republicans. There is, as far as legislation goes, in past decades, in the past 30 years or so, increasingly draconian enforcement of immigration, treatment of people who are not U.S. citizens. Trump differs only in that he is an open white supremacist. And there are people in his cabinet, leaders in his administration, a man named Stephen Miller in particular, who are very open about not wanting non-white people to immigrate to the U.S. Trump himself, in his first term, referred to Haiti and other countries as shithole countries. And it was reported by people who met with him. He said, can't we get people from Norway? I mean, why would you leave Norway with free healthcare and free education come to the U.S.? But at any rate, he meant, but Norway has people who aren't white, so it shows you how uninformed he is. But they've been very, very open about not wanting global South populations to come to the U.S. They're even attacking people who are here legally, with permanent residents. We call it a green card. These are people who are not citizens, but they're permanent residents. They're here legally. They can stay here forever if they like. They can work. They can go to school, everything. And so, for example, the Small Business Administration said there would be no more loans to green card holders. You have to be a U.S. citizen. So it went from U.S. citizens must be majority owners of the business to now loans will only go to U.S. citizens. We have actually, and we have to point out, beginning when Bill Clinton was president, so that's 30 years ago, if you are not a citizen and you're convicted of even a minor offense, you are deportable. That has been going on, but Trump has ramped it up. Now, it's very interesting that they chose the state of Minnesota in which to have this grand enforcement. There aren't many undocumented people. There are undocumented people all over the country. But in Minnesota, he has particular animus towards Black people. Minnesota is a state which took in many refugees from Somalia. Starting like 30 years ago, most of them have become U.S. citizens. But he has this animus towards them because they're African. I mean, let's just be clear. There are states with very high numbers of undocumented people, Texas, Florida, but those states are run by Republicans. So he's not going to use them as the staging ground for this attack on the entire population. And it's not just against the immigrants themselves. Well, it is. Well, let me talk about what they've been going through. So ICE has been detaining, deporting people who they know are here legally. They have been keeping people from seeing their attorneys. They have been harassing anyone who just observes them. And so this is the testing ground, I believe, for the rest of the country. Now, Trump said something else interesting. A few months ago, he and this horrible man who calls himself Secretary of War. We have the agency's called the Department of Defense for, since the end of World War II, the Defense Department. it was called the War Department during World War II. They changed it to defense. So this Pete Hegseth, who's an absolute, he's just a Trump-loving sycophant. That's why he's the head of this agency. They changed it to War Department, so he's the Secretary of War. So they called all the military brass, generals, admirals, had to come to this meeting in Washington, no matter where they were stationed, anywhere in the world, had to come to this meeting. And Hegseth, being stupid, told them they were too fat and too woke. I mean, it was the most ridiculous thing. And then Trump says, we have an enemy within, and we don't have to go to faraway places like Somalia and Kenya. Interesting choice. We have enemies right here, and they're not wearing uniform. And we are going to do something, I'm paraphrasing, about this enemy within. Well, who is that, pray tell? Basically, it's anybody who opposes him. So he told us what he was going to do. They were going to use the military to go after anyone who dissents. That's what they said. They were very clear about what they were going to do. They've been designating people domestic terrorists. What's a domestic terrorist? Anybody who opposes them. You don't have to be convicted of a crime, nothing. So this has been, he basically told us what he was going to do. They have started in Minnesota. As you pointed out, ICE operates anywhere in the country. But they've chosen that state as the place to have a show of force. What we should know about what Black people have experienced: 2 people were shot and killed by ICE, a woman, Renee Good, a man named Alex Preddy, in recent weeks. And they were both white people. However, I want people to know, and I wrote about this, police in the U.S. kill 1,200 people every year. That number does not change. 1,200 people are killed by law enforcement. Some of them are white, but disproportionately, it's Black people. Excuse me, an average of 3 people every day. One of those people will be Black, one will be white, one will be some quote unquote other. Now, we're not 1/3 of the population. Black people are like 15% of the population, something like that. So we are disproportionate amongst those victims of police violence. So people need to remember, this is not the first time that anybody has been killed. Even white people have been killed by police. Sometimes these cases do make the news, as in the case of George Floyd and others. But I'm glad when they get attention, but they're treated as though they're singular. They're treated as though they're anomalies when they're not. It's very common for the police to kill people. Today, as we speak, 3 people are going to be killed by the police. There were only 6 days in 2025 when no one was killed by the police. So the odds are somebody's dying at the hands of police today as we're speaking. So, I know there are people who say, in the United States, whenever we start talking about fascism, it's because white people get treated the way Black people are always treated. We have the world's biggest prison population. Half of all incarcerated people are Black. So we have this very racist law enforcement system. And I am glad that those 2 people killed, or that those cases are getting attention, but we need to stop acting, or too many people behave as though they are somehow unique when they are not.
That's really helpful, Margaret. One of the things that kind of occurs to me from what you were saying is that we could have had you say those exact same things during the 60s, the 70s, in terms of the way that kind of military presence really in Black communities. And I was thinking the other day about the experience faced by the Black Panthers. You mentioned the Panthers earlier on. The Bruce and Glenn were both part of the Panthers. I think one of the things that occurs to me from that was the outright military kind of war, really, that was waged on the Panthers. And the kind of images that I'm seeing at the moment on my kind of social media screens and so on every day, people walking around in masks. So they don't even show their faces, right? Walking around in masks with the up-to-date kind of firearms, all the gear, not just kind of pushing people around or having it as some kind of kind of for show. I mean, they are pointing these weapons at anybody they choose. They are identifying people and going after them afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this for me is when you study, apart from the fact that the Nazis didn't feel the need to put a mask on. This to me sounds very much like what happened in Nazi Germany. Now, a lot of people will tell me, well, Roger, this isn't the same as fascism. This isn't the same as Nazism. But what I know as a black person is I see the military attacking black communities. And that means that there is a reason behind that. And I see, as you've explained so many times, actually, and people should really, if you're not following Margaret on social media, you really should. And when Margaret really points out the way that immigration is being used as a really key part of this rise of authoritarianism in the US. Maybe say a little bit about that, Margaret, the role of immigration in all of this?
Sure. It's state repression. And they have to prepare. We had a very good article a couple of weeks ago written by Jamu Baraka. We have a great team at Black Agenda Report. And they have to turn to repression. We have an economy that is failing the vast majority of people. The ruling class they always did rule, but as capitalism intensifies, it's both in crisis and intensifying at the same time. We see it in, I don't know if that's an issue in the UK, the construction of these data centers for AI that are springing up all over the country, raising energy prices, using a great amount of water, polluting the air. And we're supposed to just go along with it, taking people's jobs. And this is to help AI. And the purpose of AI is to take people's jobs. So we have not had real wages go up since the 80s. The country has been deindustrialized. These billionaires are getting richer and richer and more powerful and more obvious in their control of the government. But this is also not new. Every president in the past 25 years, they've been bailing out the banks. Obama probably bailed out the banks actually more, billions. It could be trillions of dollars. So you have precarity. I mean, which is what they want. They want austerity. The safety net we have, which was already inadequate in the past 30 years since the fall of the Soviet Union, it was like one day they were, everything was, sort of accepted. You had to have a social security system, a pension system, pay for health care for the poor. And it was accepted. The Soviet Union collapsed. And then it was like, that doesn't work. Socialism doesn't work. And it showed very clearly, without this polar opposite that was socialist, there was no reason to go through the motions anymore. And so for the past 30 years, we have seen over time at various speeds the disintegration of the social safety net. And so, of course, and we have corporations getting richer, deindustrializations. So we have a population that's getting poorer and poorer and more desperate. And eventually, now, the U.S. being what it is, there aren't many people who are ready or able to make the connections between their living conditions and the political system, but that's not going to be the case forever. So they have to repress. They're starting with immigrants, but this is a way to keep people quiet, to keep them from protesting. And there are links with the media. You know, the Washington Post, one of the leading newspapers in the country, who's the owner, Jeff Bezos, the Amazon guy, one of the richest people on earth, controls one of the major newspapers. And all these big newspapers, they all take their direction from the state. You can see, you know, they tell you that the Iranian government is repressing its population. They do not tell you about the U.S., even when Israeli officials and U.S. officials admit that they are stirring up violence in Iran. They won't tell you this in the media. They just tell you it's evil, evil, evil. They treat women badly, blah, blah, blah. They have to cover their hair, which, as an Iranian friend told me, is not always true. So everything you're told about Iran is a lie. But the Zionists want to destroy that country. The U.S. also wants to destroy that country. That's their goal, regime change. But you don't see that in the newspapers, despite the fact that they go on and on and on. And so you have the ruling class who always did run the media, but now it's Jeff Bezos. It's very more obvious.
It's interesting you mentioned Washington Post. I just saw something that says that Washington Post has just announced that it's basically closed down its sports department in the paper, sacking loads of journalists, and particularly journalists who are kind of on, cited abroad and, supposedly there to provide international coverage. But this is as you say, quite clearly a way of being able to exert that sort of power from the ruling class. But of course, one of the things that we're also seeing from the ruling class at the minute is a complete disintegration of any kind of pretense that these people have any moral right to govern anybody. I mean, we all knew that anyway, but now it's kind of getting out there with this Epstein stuff. I mean, we've just seen, one of the arch kind of architects of New Labour in this country, Peter Mandelson, more latterly Lord Mandelson, having to resign because of his, in fact, he was also Ambassador Mandelson to the US as well, having to resign from the House of Lords, which is a whole different debate about the House of Lords and whether that should exist anyway. But also the clear links and the mentions of other very senior politicians, including Tony Blair, within these files that have been released. And as the day that we filmed this, there's a debate, question time in the British Parliament today, where the Starmer, Prime Minister, he had to answer for why he appointed Mandelson as ambassador to the US when seemingly he had all the information in front of him. Now, Starmer is one of the least liked and supported, I think perhaps even more unpopular than that Tory who was there for about 40 days or something. I mean, he's even more unpopular than that person whose name has left my head, and I never want to have it back in my head, to be honest. But he's clearly riled his own side. And so Labour members of Parliament have clearly had enough of this, and they see the writing on the wall as well. There's lots of evidence that Labour has got no chance of winning anything anywhere at any time with Starmer as Prime Minister. I'm thinking, but one of the things that occurs to me, Margaret, is that with all of this taking place, it's obviously not just in Britain, and it's not just across Europe where other politicians are mentioned and have been forced to resign. But this is, should be for any other president, it seems to me, this would be the end in the US, but there's a glue there, it seems to me, that's holding Trump in, and maybe it is the likes of Bezos and the rest of them who are offering that sort of protection. How do you see what's been happening, the revelations that have come out, but where do you see that all going?
Well, this week I wrote my column. Is called "The Epstein Files Show How the Elites Move," and I mentioned Peter Mandelson, relationships Epstein had here in the U.S. I did not realize he was so wealthy, almost a $600 million estate. We've heard a lot about the the sex trafficking, and as well we should, but that was like his side hustle, to use a U.S. expression. The sex trafficking was used to compromise very powerful people, generally on behalf of Israel. But we see how the world works, how this man, Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, Mandelson, Bill Gates, alleged leftists like Noam Chomsky, all of these people going to his private island, some of them partaking in, as he was a world's pimp, some of them just being under his influence. We're finding out the Oslo Accords, which were so devastating to Palestine. A Norwegian couple, diplomats, were taking money from him. So this wealthy Zionist is paying off people. The archives have disappeared from Oslo. These are things I've found out in researching my article. So this man tells us how the elites really move, how they really work. And I think it's so important to reveal this, because we're always told we live in a democracy, like in your country. It's a democracy. You can vote, you can participate. And I'm not going to say don't vote, but don't think that's the end of it, that the ruling class care what you want at all. They may have to pick someone who's different from the last person they picked. But it literally is true that that's how they work. This Mandelson guy, he was one of the people who helped undermine Jeremy Corbyn. They wanted to make sure you are not even a little liberalish reform, nothing is going to be allowed to change. And they made sure through a variety of means that he was not going to be prime minister. And that's what happens in the US too. So I think it's important for people to pay less attention to who's in his files. It's what was he doing? There's one email, an associate says we can go get some of that money after the US and NATO destroyed Libya. We can go get some of that money. I mean, we see it's just naked aggression. We've seen now how terrible, how corrupt the ruling classes are. And that's the most important thing that I think people need to pay attention to in these political crises. The other thing I want to say about Trump is he shows the failure of the liberal class. No one stands up to him. As he always says, they're kissing my ass. Well, it's true. When a Democrat is president, when Democrats are in control of Congress, there's always some excuse. Well, we want to do this, but we can't. Well, we have a majority, but it's a slim majority. Well, we can't do this. We can't do that. Donald Trump does everything he wants. I mean, everything. He's so petty. He wanted to run the Kennedy Center, Performing Arts Center, named after John F. Kennedy. He put his name on the building. I mean, it's very Trumpian. It's such a crazy thing. Now he says he's going to close it down and destroy it. But none of these people stand in his way. Excuse me, these billionaires and philanthropists who usually control these things, they've let him do what he wants to do. The Republican Party, they don't stand up to him, and neither do Democrats. So how do I simplify this? So in order for the budget to be approved, an opposition party, even in the minority, they can stop a budget from being approved. So people have been demanding that Democrats do something about ICE. But what do the leaders of the Democrats do? They say, well, They've got to wear body cameras. They were wearing body cameras when they shot and killed people. This is absurd. They haven't said anything about the abuses I've mentioned. So we have an alleged opposition, and maybe they wouldn't do the things that Trump is doing, but if they don't stand up to him, so what?
So have they said anything, the opposition, have they said anything about, I mean, something I saw this week about, so there was a interview that Trump gave with, I think he was the former deputy FBI person, where he said, well, what we should do, I wrote about this in the Morning Star this week, was that, well, what we should do is we should nationalize elections. So, you know, Republicans have always been these people who sort of states' rights, and everything should be done by the states, except Trump is now saying 15, he said, there are 15 places that we should nationalize the polls on. Have the Democrats even said anything about that? Because it is really clear that Trump is in trouble with the midterm elections in November, and he is really clear that he's absolutely up for stealing this election.
Oh, absolutely. So under U.S. law, the states call elections. So the state of New York, where I live, or California, or Florida, or wherever, they are the ones, the states have authority, have jurisdiction over holding elections, counting the votes. The entire election apparatus is to be in the control of the states. Trump is still saying he was cheated in 2020. Last week, they rated the state of Georgia. He narrowly lost the state of Georgia, and he's obsessed that, he was cheated somehow. So the FBI raided the Board of Elections in Georgia and took all of these ballots and claiming they have authority when they don't. But in the absence of anybody standing up, in the absence of federal judges, federal courts are powerful in the U.S. These judges have lifetime appointments. They're appointed either by the president, so some are Democrats, some are Republicans. They have not stood up in the ways that they should. But the federal government, even though, when I go to vote, I may be voting for a local official and also for a member of Congress and also for president. So I do vote for federal offices, but it's the state of New York that is supposed to be in charge. This is something that should be causing more distress than I have seen being expressed. And that's another thing about Trump. I think he's worn people down, and they didn't have a lot of courage to begin with. And so there's just one thing after another. Sometimes it's something petty and stupid, like he wants to run the Kennedy Center. And sometimes it's like he wants to run the election. So this is terrible. This is absolutely awful. He knows he could lose, that the Republicans can lose control of Congress this November during the midterm elections. But in the absence of the Democratic Party standing up, in the absence of the federal judiciary standing up, I fear that he could be able to do it in places around the country. But, this is the authoritarianism that people should be concerned about. And but I think a combination of weariness on the part of people, the weakness of the so-called opposition, people feel like there's nothing they can do. But I don't think that's true.
No, I don't think that's true either. And that's really kind of the next question, really. Mm-hmm. Given that neither of us think that that's true, what is it that can be done that we're not already doing, or should we be doing more of what we're doing? I mean, what is it that we need to do to take on and defeat this authoritarianism?
I think we have to keep doing what we're doing, keep speaking out, keep writing, keep educating people, mobilizing. There are many people now who are working towards a nationwide general strike. There was one, excuse me, in Minnesota itself a couple of weeks ago. It was very successful.
Yeah, I
Many
saw. Yeah.
businesses closed down. People didn't go to work. And there are folks working on having a national general strike. And it's overdue, not just because of Trump. We've seen this decline in living standards, this decline in political engagement, the Democrats going along with Republicans, and they've handed Trump a lot of, he goes to a place they haven't gone to, but it's with their help. And so I think that is, it has to be something very drastic, and it cannot be directed solely at him. That is a problem. If you get a president who's nicer, who has better manners, or doesn't, obsess about snatching Greenland or something, something Trumpian and crazy, that we could go back to politics that should end. The entire political process needs to be radically changed in this country. One of my fears about Trump is that when he leaves office, whenever that is, that people will just breathe a sigh of relief. Oh, he's gone. So everything's okay now. We have a Democrat in who's not crazy. Okay, maybe not. But they are still, they're the errand boys and errand girls of the ruling class. And people also have to accept that electoral politics alone is not going to save us. There has to be mass action. And I think a national general strike is a good first step.
Yeah, I think people have to take this for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I've always thought that this notion of business, back to normal, what is normal continuing, the continuing lowering of people's standards of living, continuing racism that people are experiencing. Is that normal? And we're just supposed to put up with that. And that's why I think there needs to be something I've been arguing in a number of things that I've written recently. There needs to be a shift in paradigm, I think, where our thinking needs to change, that all we need to do is to go back to a milder version of what we are now experiencing. And for me, that's not good enough. And I think we all deserve better than that. So we've come to the point where I kind of need to wind up, but this is so fascinating. I'm going to have to ask you on again, Margaret, at some point, if that's okay. I suppose I've kind of bigged up a lot of your work. I just want to make sure I haven't missed anything. So where can people follow your work just now?
Sure. blackagendareport.com. We have a new issue every Wednesday. We have a podcast, Black Agenda Radio, every Friday. Also on blackagendareport.com, you can, we post on X, Twitter, on Facebook. I am on Twitter. Freedom Ride Blog is my handle, and I'm on it a lot, maybe too much. I don't know. But
not for me, not enough for me.
Thank you very much. I'm on Facebook also. So the usual, we're on Instagram. I'm on Instagram. I don't like Instagram personally. It's hard for me to get used to it. But anyway, we're there as well. So most of the social media sites where you can find others, you can find us. You can still buy my book, Prejudential Black America and the Presidents. I'm holding too much here. Here's my book. I don't know if people mirrored it.
We will put it all in the show notes.
And you mentioned anyway. China Changes Everything, a great anthology that I and others contributed to. I think it's very important, as you pointed out. Our delegation and I visited China again. That was 2 years ago, believe it or not. Last year I visited again. It's an example. That's why they're always talking about how horrible China is. It's an example of a country that can prosper for its people without invading other countries, without exploiting other people, with socialist principles. So when people in the U.S. always say socialism doesn't work, and I was like, well, I didn't see anybody sleeping on the street in Beijing or the other Chinese cities I visited. I didn't see it once. I've been to 6 or 7 major cities in China. I never saw anybody living on the street. You call it rough sleeping, I believe, but I didn't see it in China anywhere. Cities with millions of people. So we have to always keep in mind these examples, which is why they're under attack, because they're examples of a different kind of life, a different kind of world we can have.
It was almost as if we'd planned this, right? Because our guest in March will be Carlos Martinez from Friends of Socialist China. And we'll be having a chat about all things China, but mainly China's foreign policy stuff. But no doubt we'll talk about some of the domestic stuff as well. Margaret, can I thank you so much for giving up your time, and to always, honestly, gives me a real thrill to get a chance to have a chat with you.
Thank you so much.
Really does.
I look forward to watching this. I thank you for the invitation. This has been great. It's been fun. It's been enjoyable too. And we can't pass up these opportunities to help people along in understanding these things.
Absolutely. And can I thank all of our viewers and listeners, and remind you again, all the information for the where you can contact Margaret, stay in touch with her work, will be in the show notes. The information about this podcast, so Manifesto Press, Red Star Media, and the Morning Star will all have links to this podcast as well. And as I said, we'll be back next month, and our guest at that time will be Carlos Martinez from Friends of Socialist China. Again, can I ask you all, please press that like button. It really helps in terms of the algorithm, so we can get more people to engage with this podcast, share it, get other people to tune in as well. But most of all, as me and Margaret, I hope, have made clear, is not just about talking about things. This is about doing things. It's about going out and organizing, raising the issues that we've talked about tonight. And we've just brushed a number of these issues, but there's a whole lot going on out there that we really need to engage with in an organizing sense, and make sure that our voices as working class people are heard, and that people understand that we've had enough of being treated the way that they treat us, and that we want a new world. And not only is a new world possible, as Arundhati Roy once said, if you listen carefully, you can hear it being born right now. And I think that's a really important point to end on. Thanks so much, Margaret, again. Thank you all for listening and watching in. Thanks all. Stay strong, stay cool. Bye.
Thank you.